Land Forces and Land Forces to order. I ask unanimous consent that non-subcommittee members be allowed to participate in today's hearing after all subcommittee members have had an opportunity to ask questions. Is there objection? Without objection, non-subcommittee members will be recognized at the appropriate time for 5 minutes. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished members of the subcommittee and representatives from the Department of Defense, I want to welcome everyone to this pivotal hearing on Army aviation and their rebalancing efforts. I look forward to discussing the progress and challenges of our rotary-winged unmanned systems and communities and how the Army plans on modernizing its aviation forces to meet the demands of the future battlefield. In wake of the lessons learned in ongoing conflicts, most notably in Ukraine, it has become apparent that the demand for maintaining consistent and clear situational awareness is insatiable on the modern battlefield. This battlefield sensing demand has become not just a capability, but a necessity for operational success and survival. Moreover, these ongoing conflicts have highlighted both the effectiveness, survivability, and utility of legacy rotorcraft and the dire need to adjust a battlefield proliferated with inexpensive, uncrewed systems. Today, we will hear from our distinguished panel of witnesses, Assistant Secretary Doug Bush, General James Rainey, Major General Michael McCurry, and Brigadier General David Phillips on how the Army plans to navigate the complexities of aviation modernization, manage risks across the aviation portfolio, and how their plan to rebalance our future aviation fleet aligns with the Army's overarching modernization priorities. I can confidently say that of particular interest to this committee is the Army's Future Vertical Lift Initiative. In fact, several of our witnesses here today testified last year on the necessity of the Future Attack Reconnaissance Aircraft, more commonly referred to as FARA, which sits within the Future Vertical Lift Initiative and whose development the Army plans to terminate. After drastically emphasizing the necessity to fill this attack and reconnaissance capability gap through testimonies and classified briefs, it is imperative that the Army explain to this committee on how it either plans to address this capability gap without FARA or explain why this capability gap no longer exists. Moreover, while I applaud the Army's ability to make hard choices, especially in light of a fiscally difficult environment, I am concerned that the Army's acquisition strategy on FARA has led to a loss of $2 billion in taxpayers' dollars that may have been somewhat alleviated had the Army followed a more traditional major defense acquisition program pathway from the beginning. We need the Army and the Department of Defense to make pivots to keep pace with rapidly changing technologies, but these pivots must happen faster and before we have invested billions of dollars. Finally, I'm somewhat bewildered on why the Army didn't factor in a healthier contingency of alternatives when conducting their analysis of alternatives, the document that they have presented on their FARA decision-making. As for the rest of the Army's rotorcraft plans, I am encouraged to see the Army move forward on Chinook Block 2s, increase investment in unmanned systems, and continue investment in the future long-range assault aircraft, the V-280, which is slated to replace the UH-60 Black Hawk. I look forward to hearing from our witnesses on how they plan on investing in UH-60 Black Hawk upgrades and a new multi-year contract while simultaneously spending billions of dollars on the system's replacement. I believe the discussion on balancing the two platforms will be a fruitful one. As for unmanned platforms, it is concerning that the Army has decided to retire the RQ-7 Shadow while its replacement, the Future Tactical Unmanned Aircraft, is still 2 years away from entering full-rate production. While I support the retirement of a system that may no longer be operationally relevant, it is clear that unmanned systems are becoming integral to the battlefield, yet it appears that the Army has been caught flat-footed. I look forward to hearing from our witnesses on how they plan to bridge this capability gap. Finally, and as I have mentioned, with the exponential growth of unmanned systems on the battlefield and the counter-unmanned systems that must be developed in tandem, I believe it is time to give serious consideration to establishing a drone corps within the Army that specializes in these systems. Unlocking the full potential of unmanned platforms for the Army will require soldiers to develop specialized skills and a deep understanding of various associated technologies. A drone corps may better lend itself to allowing the broad array of expertise required to mature within the Army and for systems' unique capabilities to grow beyond their role primarily as enablers to the current combat arms branches. As we delve into these discussions, it's imperative to explore the implications of these Army aviation decisions not only on the Army's operational capabilities, but also on the defense industrial base. The budgetary allocations and broader strategic implications of the Department of Defense need to be in the forefront of decision-making. Questions around the balance between maintaining legacy platforms, investing in future capabilities, the effective use of taxpayers' dollars, and ensuring that the Army remains at the cutting edge of technological advancements in aviation will be critical. This hearing is not just an examination of the Army's aviation modernization strategy, but a dialogue on encouraging that this strategy is responsive to the realities of modern warfare, is financially stable, and aligned with the broader goals of national security and defense. I look forward to a productive and enlightening discussion on these topics, and I want to thank our witnesses for their dedication and commitment to the defense of our great nation and for appearing before us today. And now I turn to our ranking member, the gentleman from New Jersey, my friend, Mr. Norcross.
Thank you, Chairman, and I'd like to thank the witnesses for working with us. Let me start out with the good news. We just passed some appropriations, so we'll start with that. We have more to go, but let's start out on the right foot, and certainly appreciate you being here. The Army recently announced the rebalancing effort for aviation. It encompasses various programs that impact rotary wing and tilt rotor industrial base across the U.S. Of the most important, however, is that these decisions, do they align with the Army requirements and a broader force design strategy? I recognize we can't yet quite have that conversation on the soon-to-be-released President's budget request for year 2025. However, I believe it is quite a bit we can discuss regarding some of these decisions. I'd like to begin with the strong support for the Army's decision to move into production with the CH-47F Block II Chinook helicopter. It's an immensely impressive aircraft and will deliver only more capability with the Block II improvement. Moreover, this decision mitigates emerging risks in the Philadelphia aviation area industrial base. And I look forward to receiving the budget request in the next week or so to evaluate how the Army intends to procure the CH-47F Block II aircraft over the next 5 years and beyond. Turning to the Army's decision to end development of the Future Attack and Reconnaissance Aircraft, for Farah, the Army has spent approximately $2 billion to develop this program. That's a lot of money for a program that we won't field. I can't help but note that this is the Army's third attempt at developing and fielding this capability. So I guess the question is, we need to answer today is, what has changed, particularly over the last year, that led to this decision? I hope today General Rainey can speak to the requirements and any emerging analysis that has informed this decision, and he'll explain how the Army intends to provide a capability for vertical lift arm reconnaissance. I also hope that Assistant Secretary Bush will help the subcommittee better understand what return, if any, taxpayers will see on their investment for $2 billion. How will we leverage what we've learned through Farah to better develop and field capabilities that the Army needs? As a subset of Farah, but impacting multiple programs, will be the Army announced that they will delay development of the improved turbine engine. This makes sense given the cancellation of Farah development effort. However, we need to better understand the plan for ITEP integration into Black Hawk and Apache fleets. Will the Army move the development and integration timelines forward, or do you intend to pause the entire effort pending further analysis? Lastly, the vulnerable Black Hawk helicopter. I'm happy to see that the Army intends to move forward with another multi-year procurement contract for this aircraft beginning fiscal 27 and spanning, hopefully, 5 years. Given the Army's decision to simultaneously cancel the UH-60 program, which largely supports the Guard, can you please inform and confirm that the Guard will receive instead the UH-60M aircraft? Moreover, because canceling the UH-60V program, does the Army intend to incorporate any of these capabilities into the M model? We often think programmatic decisions only impact the prime contractor, but we must also remember that the entire ecosystem of sub-tier contractors, often small business, some who live and die based on these decisions. And once we lose a supplier, as we all know, it's incredibly hard to find a replacement source. Stability and industrial base matters. Stability and industrial base matters. And I'd like to offer to our witnesses today that I think we made some hard decisions here, and you've done an admirable job of stabilizing the broader industrial base. So I want to thank you for your thoughtfulness, your phone calls, and educating us on the first phase. We obviously have many more questions. So in closing, this hearing is timely and important. The Army wants to make big decisions regarding the aviation community, and it's our job to evaluate those decisions and then approve, modify, or deny. As I stated, I think we've done a good job managing the industrial risk, but we really need to better understand how these decisions fit into that broader strategy that we've had the conversations on, and delivering sufficient capacity of the right capabilities to the combatant commanders. And I want to thank the witnesses again for working with us, and I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Norcross. We appreciate it. I thank our subcommittee members for joining us, especially Dr. McCormick, who provided an invaluable assist to the committee chairman the last time we talked about rotary winged aircraft, where I had a hard time enunciating my words. Dr. McCormick, thank you. He reminded me that it takes a Marine to actually properly enunciate a difficult word, and a numbskull like me couldn't pull it off. So, Dr. McCormick, I thank you. We're going to go to our witnesses now. We have with us today the Honorable Doug Bush, Assistant Secretary of the Army for Acquisition, Logistics, and Technology, General James E. Rainey, Commanding General at U.S. Army Futures Command, Major General Michael McCurry, Commanding General at the U.S. Army Aviation Center for Excellence, and Brigadier General David Phillips, Program Executive Officer at PEO Aviation. And with that, Secretary Bush, I will turn to you because I understand you will give the opening statement for the panel.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Whitman, Ranking Member Norcross, and distinguished members of the Subcommittee on Tactical Air and Land Forces, thank you for this opportunity to discuss the Army's aviation programs and modernization efforts. I'm pleased to be joined today by my teammates, General James Rainey, the Commanding General of Army Futures Command, Major General Michael McCurry, the Commanding General of the United States Army Aviation Center of Excellence, and Brigadier General David Phillips, the Army's Program Executive Officer for Aviation. Army aviation is a key element of the joint and multinational force. Aviation provides critical capabilities to maintain superiority over our adversaries by increasing lethality and survivability of the joint and combined arms team, providing enhanced mobility into and within the theater of operations, and enabling unprecedented situational awareness and battle space integration. Army aviation is the cross-domain solution for Army and Joint Land Force commanders to simultaneously create and exploit relative advantages. As part of the land component operating in the lower tier of the air domain, Army aviation is a decisive capability in domain interdependence, operating in the nexus between the air, ground, and maritime domains. Army aviation's ability to see, sense, strike, move, and extend is critical to our ability to fight and win in large-scale combat operations. Major investments in new airframes, technology, unmanned systems, and the aviation industrial base are necessary to achieve overmatch against near-peer competitors. Our focus on modernization comprises two parallel lines of execution. First, development and fielding of new platforms and new capabilities. And second, modernization of our current fleet. We remain deeply committed to maintaining the modernization momentum of the overall future vertical lift portfolio, comprised of the future long-range assault aircraft, future unmanned aircraft system, and launched effects to help deliver the Army of 2030. We also remain keenly focused on our current fleet, making prudent investments to address safety, obsolescence, and the aviation industrial base at large. This resourcing strategy requires a synchronized effort to provide the best capability to our soldiers and commanders on the ground in support of the Joint and Combined Arms team. Recently, the Army announced a rebalancing within its aviation portfolio to ensure we upgrade current platforms and shift investments over time to unmanned systems. Army senior leaders made 4 decisions. First, to end development of the Future Attack Reconnaissance Aircraft at the conclusion of fiscal year 24 prototyping activities. Second, to end production of the UH-60V or Victor version of the Black Hawk after the aircraft funded in 24 are delivered. Third, to delay entering production of the improved turbine engine program. And fourth, to phase out operations and sustainment of the legacy Shadow and Raven unmanned aircraft systems. With those decisions, 4 other decisions were part of the overall strategy. First, the Army will commit to another multi-year contract to produce UH-60 Mike Black Hawk helicopters, a new airframe with over 20 years of service life, and invest in upgrades for the Black Hawk. Second, the Army will formally enter production for the CH-47F Block II Chinook helicopter in FY25, with an objective to affordably modernize the current fleet. Third, we will increase investments in research and development to expand and accelerate the Army's unmanned aerial reconnaissance capability to include the Future Tactical Unmanned Aircraft System, launched effects, and commercial small unmanned aircraft systems. And fourth, the Army will continue the Future Long-Range Assault Aircraft Program as planned, still aiming to equip our first unit in FY30. These rebalancing decisions did not come lightly, nor was any single factor that drove the Army to make these decisions in its aviation portfolio. But I will highlight a few factors. First, there is an ever-changing battlefield. As demonstrated recently by real-world events in Ukraine and the Middle East, it continues to become increasingly clear that the Army must be able to adapt and respond to a changing battlefield. Given the evolution of aerial reconnaissance, transport, and combat technologies, evidenced in Ukraine's defense against Russian aggression, we know we must shift to a focus on a mix of current unmanned joint space assets to do the mission originally envisioned for the Farah aircraft. Second, there were industrial base concerns. Prior to the rebalance, the aviation industrial base was on a path to have 2 production lines go cold within 5 years. The conflict in Ukraine has reinforced the importance of the U.S. having a robust industrial base that is equipped to respond to the demands of the battlefield, the nation's stockpiles, and the needs of our allies. In light of these lessons learned, the Army determined that the previous path carried too much risk over the long term. If Congress approves, the Army will instead be able to sustain current production, the UH-60M Black Hawks and CH-47F Block II. These production activities will help maintain both the workforce and, importantly, the supplier base for both of these critical platforms for the Army. The Army is also planning to set up additional research and development resources for the UH-60M Black Hawks to continue to improve that vital platform. Army leaders carefully considered the workforces that support the current FAR prototyping efforts and that of the UH-60V Black Hawks in their decisions. The Army is committed to working closely with our industry partners to conduct an orderly ramp down of those efforts and allow personnel time to shift to new and different priorities. A third factor, the Army will always be committed to equipping our soldiers primarily, and absolutely that is always our #1 priority. But we are also committed to working to promote interoperability and strengthening our worldwide security partnerships. The Army seeks to provide clarity to our allies involved in our aviation programs through foreign military sales. Announcing this rebalance now makes it clear the Army will continue to build CH-47s, UH-60s, develop the FLRAA, all of which strengthen those industrial bases and support more foreign procurements of these aircraft. And lastly, the rebalance recognizes recent success in Army experimentation. This factor was important. A final factor affecting our decision was the dramatically increased pace of experimentation and development in recent years. Project Convergence, the Army's campaign of continuous learning, is demonstrating to us the feasibility and potential of future unmanned systems and launched effects. These capabilities, when developed, will magnify the lethality and survivability of our combat formations. In conclusion, we can assure you that the Army's senior leaders continue to work hard to address current challenges as well as the needs of Army aviation in the future. We will meet the equipping needs of our soldiers while remaining good stewards of the nation's resources. Mr. Chairman and distinguished members of the subcommittee, thank you for your steadfast and strong support of our outstanding soldiers, civilians, and their families, and we look forward to answering your questions.
Very good. Thank you, Secretary Bush. We appreciate your perspective on the future of Army aviation and the challenges that are ahead and the things that you have pursued in the interim. I'm going to begin with General Rainey. If we look at where we are today and you look at the Ukrainian military, arguably they're the most experienced in the area of kinetic conflict against a near-peer adversary, and they've accrued quite a bit of experience there. Just yesterday, General Mingus, Vice Chief of Staff of the Army, expressed some frustration with where the Army is in both drone technology and counter-drone capability, expressing some concerns about the organizational aspects of where the Army is with that effort. And we know that we see the world around us. There's exponential growth in the technology and the ability for drones to operate in a variety of different circumstances. And the challenge of fielding counter-drone technologies, we know that's the world that we live in. We know that's a building threat, I would argue, orders of magnitude almost on a yearly basis. If we look at where Army aviation is today, the entire suite of where we see that capability, is the Army in a situation to make sure they provide the necessary battlefield sensing and counter-drone capabilities as it exists today? And do you agree with General Mingus that there are some organizational challenges ahead for the Army in making sure that if they don't have this ability today, to build it quickly, to build it at the speed of relevance? And would establishing a drone corps, a single focused effort within the Army, would that be able to accomplish what right now has been somewhat of a fragmented effort along those different lines?
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the opportunity to be here, and appreciate the strong support we've received. A lot of questions there. I definitely agree with the Vice Chairman and our Chief and our Secretary and Mr. Bush that we need to rapidly adapt to the clear disruption that we're witnessing in the war in Ukraine. And two of the major areas are increasing UAS and counter-UAS. So I'm not sure what General Mingus meant organizationally, but I absolutely agree. There's a clear understanding of that. It's been a priority for our Secretary and especially for General George over the time he's been our chief. Watching what's happening in Ukraine, absolutely the most disruptive couple years that I think, at least back until World War II, in terms of technology disrupting. The good news there is I believe that technology is one of our superpowers here in the United States. So I don't think there's a lack of great technology out there in the UAS or counter UAS. I think and we have requirements for all those things. I think what we have to get better at, and we're all working on this, is rapidly adopting technology that exists. So working closely with Congress to put the money behind those requirements that we understand. The Ukrainians were, as you know, the Army's had observation teams in place before the Russians invaded, and we're paying very close attention to that. Some of it is, we got to be careful because some of it is different than the way we fight as the United States, but absolutely in the emerging air-ground littoral, if you will, the first couple thousand feet off the ground, it's obvious that we have to add UAS capability at echelon, and that's a big part of our strategy. You asked about mitigating the risk that we're seeing. If I could,
Yes.
I could talk about that briefly.
Sure.
And Mr. Bush mentioned what we're learning in terms of unmanned systems and technology. So we fight as a joint force, and we have great teammates. Space-based sensing. So the requirement to conduct reconnaissance and security and sense is obviously not gone away. It's been a constant in the history of warfare. We believe it'll be even more decisive going forward. So our joint teammates, the Space Force, but also cyber, the ability to sense an electromagnetic spectrum is proliferating, and we have the world's best as part of our joint force. Our soft teammates, in Ukraine, you're a different classification, but our ability to work with great partners and employ our huge asymmetric advantage we have in Special Forces, and the Navy and Air Force are working on programs that are going to be useful in this space too. When you come down into the Army, launched effects, we've learned so much about the idea that you can employ ground-based or air-based vehicle that can penetrate enemy A2AD and then employ a variety of sensors. We have 3 versions of those that are funded. We're increasing funding to those. They'll come online 25 through 27, and obviously we could accelerate those if we needed to. So that's a big part about it. And we're adding unmanned aerial systems at echelon in the Army, from the soldier all the way up through Corps. And those are programs. We've written new directed requirements for loitering munitions, ground-based missiles. So I feel comfortable that we understand what we need to do, that we have requirements. There's no shortage of great technology in the United States. We just need to continue to follow through and move faster, sir.
That echelon reorganization you talk about taking place at the Corps level, would that include the concept of a drone corps at that level of operation?
I've not personally been in any conversations or thought about a drone corps. I read the recent article. It's very interesting. Obviously, we need to pay attention to what's happening. What we are working on, so a similar approach, which I think is on track, is what we refer to as human-machine integrated formations. We've been working on that for 18 months. They're real. The first 2 platoons are actually going to be live firing out at Project Convergence next month at NTC. So what we believe, sir, is the right combination of unmanned air, unmanned ground, and manned vehicles in a way that optimizes the capabilities of both. Whether those turn into a corps, a branch, the most important thing is building those formations. Because the one thing, and you know, the one thing that robots and machines are never going to do is practice ethical decision-making, intuition, curiosity, the art of command. But at the same time, there's no excuse if we make contact with the enemy with our men and women, given the current state of technology.
I agree. We'll now turn to Mr. Norcross.
Thank you, Chairman. So, major decision is upon us. Never taken lightly, and certainly has great impacts. But I just want to make sure that we walk through, because many people have questions, certainly us. You know, we witnessed 2 major conflicts going on. Its impact on this decision, less Israel and Gaza, but certainly Ukraine. General Rainey, had the requirements changed for the attack and reconnaissance aircraft?
Sir, the requirement to conduct reconnaissance and security has not changed. The approach to solving that, we are shifting from a manned reconnaissance aircraft to take advantage of the combination of unmanned and joint capabilities to include Army. Things like the Apache, which we believe is the world's premier combat aviation capability, bringing that to bear. So the requirement remains valid. The approach to solving that is the decision the Secretary-in-Chief made.
So you led into my follow-up exactly. So over the course of the last year, and again, this the 3rd shot at it, there's $2 billion. What analysis, what actually informed the Army that we're going to shift again on Farah? What was it, and when did that occur? Was it over the course, you or Mr. Bush?
So, sir, I think it was a combination of factors that I outlined. One was the recognition that General Rainey articulated very well, that the battlefield's changing, technology's changing, and the Army has to change with it. So learning from what we're seeing now and preparing our soldiers for the future is always the #1 priority. Number 2, sir, was that industrial-based risk I outlined. I believe our effort regarding trying to ramp up production for Ukraine has highlighted the importance of those production lines, and we were looking at a situation where we wouldn't have those production lines by the end of this decade. And that was a factor. And then, sir, also our belief that, as General Rainey articulated, that 10 years from now, when we would have had Farah, that unmanned technology paired with manned platforms integrated into formations of amazing soldiers, that General McCurry is responsible for training and equipping. All of that together, sir, we believe could address the issue, but that doesn't make the mission go away. So, sir, I would say it's a combination of factors the Secretary-in-Chief had to confront.
Not an easy decision, especially in light of going down the road. So let's talk about what is it that we gained for those $2 billion. Obviously, it doesn't disappear. There was a tremendous amount of research, development, So what have we learned from the program that we don't walk away empty-handed? Where is that going to be used elsewhere? And in an open session, can you talk about some of those?
Yeah, absolutely, Congressman. Thank you very much. And we don't take the treasure that we're provided lightly, obviously. So we did not spend the money we spent on Farah and waste it. We learned numerous things, and I'll let General McCurry, but modeling and simulation that we developed as part of this, the whole launched effects ecosystem was one of the main things we benefited from over the course of this study. And those are things that we're going to apply. The idea of open architecture is cascading not just to our other aviation platforms, but it went a long way to informing things like the XM30 development, next generation tank. But Mac, if you want to go into a little more detail, please.
Thank you, sir, and thanks, gentlemen, for inviting us here and letting us be here, and thanks for the support of Army Aviation over the years. Really, the 55,000 soldiers across all three components of our total Army force really appreciate the continued support. I think General Rainey hit a few things, but from more of a tactical sense. What's transferable? What did we learn in the great work that the FVLCFT and the PEO did? Degraded visual environment. We've been working on it for a few years, and it started out with land and dust environments. I would tell you our definition going forward is how do I put Rangers on the objective when nobody else in the world can fly? That's where we want to go with DVE, and we transfer some of the sensor processing and the heads-up helmet-mounted displays that we're working on through the FARA program to other programs to do that. We also did a lot of work on, remember FARA was more than a platform, it was an ecosystem. We did a lot of work on miniaturization of sensors, lightweight sensors that can be easily transferred to some of the unmanned systems that the chairman mentioned. And I would say in the sustainment realm specifically, we did a lot of adaptive work with additive manufacturing and things that help get us away from forgings and castings, increase our maintenance-free operating periods as we have to be more dispersed on the future battlefield.
Thank you. I'm going to give a chance to others. Yield back.
Thank you. When I go to Mr. Jimenez.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Some of the comments, stated kind of concern me, and it's not just in the Army, but all around our industrial base as we try to ramp up. And, historically, once we become dominant or we win, there is this peace dividend that we kind of reap. But in the end, we always pay for that peace dividend by spending more money, and particularly we get ourselves in a conflict, and we pay it in blood. And so for me, I'm going to put a premise that the only peace dividend that we should be looking for is peace itself, and that only comes through strength. And we need to keep our industrial base occupied and producing weapons all the time so that nobody will ever dare test us. As we become weak, we will be tested. And then we have to ramp up our base, and then we also have to get into a conflict. So I fear a conflict is coming because we have neglected our industrial base of the entire nation, actually. So on this FARA program, last year, you all testified in front of this committee of the absolute necessity of the FARA program. And I guess you've already answered part of this question. Can you explain what new analysis went into this decision of canceling it and what has changed? What has changed in the last year? Because the Ukrainian war was actually going on a year before that, and we had learned already some of the lessons of that. So what in particularly changed from last year to this year?
Thank you, Congressman. Three specific things, in my view, and Mr. Bush alluded to them in his opening. So it's what we're seeing in the war, and it has been 2 years, but it's increased the speed, the amount of evolutions in the UAV, the emergence of counter-UAS technology. So what's happening in the war, what we have learned through launched effects and Project Convergence and our experimentation, so another 12 months of really positive developments, not just in the military, but our tech industry teammates, to your point about, the industrial base, and there's the whole tech industrial base, which I believe is really, really developing and promising, and one of the places where we're still outpacing our enemies. And the third one is the overall modernization effort of the Army. Almost all of our modernization efforts are on track or ahead of track, and there's a fiscal pressure on that as we decide, and the Chief and Secretary had to make hard choices about where to move forward.
Do you doubt the survivability of that helicopter or that platform?
Sir,
In the modern battlefield with new anti-aircraft weapons, not just the conventional missile, but now also looking at maybe at directed energy weapons, et cetera. Do you doubt the survivability of that platform?
Sir, I believe that manned aircraft against a high-end threat on the future battlefield is extremely high risk. And with the exception of times where we need to vertically envelop our enemies, so the ability to move rifle squads and platoons is something we will have to do, because we don't do attrition warfare and get ground off. But that is going to be an incredibly complex joint forcible entry. It's going to take the whole joint force, and we'll be judicious. With the exception of that, I believe that the right thing to do is to use unmanned systems and not put humans in harm's way. Make contact with unmanned systems, with robots, outsense the enemy, employ long-range fires, and please, for clarity, the dominant land forces that we have, to your point, that's what deters our enemies. You know, having to fight soldiers and Marines on the ground with our tanks, our infantry fighting vehicles, our rifle squads is what is going to deter a war that absolutely nobody wants to fight.
Yeah, I agree with the General. I think that the future of aerial combat is going to be fraught with danger for manned systems. It's just going to be more and more dangerous as the capabilities of our enemies increase. And it's going to be just as dangerous for them, hopefully, right?
Hopefully more so.
And so, yeah, we may end up going a little bit, back to the future of warfare, where we were completely dominant in the air, but we're not going to be completely dominant in the air. So I think you're heading in the right direction. My concern is our industrial base and the ability to produce the weapons of the future and the mass necessary in order to overwhelm our adversaries. And that's what really I'm concerned with. So I hope we are making strides on that side too. Thank you, and I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Jimenez, and we'll now go to Mr. Courtney.
Great, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and to witnesses. And on that point regarding the industrial base, Mr. Bush, on page 4 of your testimony, you state the conflict in Ukraine has reinforced the importance of the U.S. having a robust industrial base that is equipped to respond to the demands of the battlefield, nation's stockpiles, and the needs of our allies, which I think, again, nicely states, what Congress and obviously the Army and all the services really are confronting. So, this decision to end the Farah program sort of begs the question about the fact that there were about 600 engineers in Stratford, Connecticut that were hard at work in terms of the Farah program. And it's like the Hunger Games out there right now for anyone with an engineering degree, And so I guess the question is, in terms of just trying to retain that skill, that precious skill for aviation priorities of the Army. I mean, can you sort of talk through how you're going to try and preserve that?
Yes, sir. There's a couple parts to it. The first one involves FY24. So one reason we did the announcement we did, we wanted to, and also shape that discussion, that we still need that FY24 funding in these areas to allow transition, we hope, of that talented workforce to other work. So that was part of the consideration, was to build a bridge to allow this to happen in an orderly way. Also to take care of people. These are hardworking Americans. They're doing great work for us in the Army, and we wanted to give us, working with our industry partners, an opportunity to treat them as best we can, even though this was obviously a major change. That's one, sir. Two, when you see the 25 budget, you will see across the FIDUP a commitment to Black Hawk R&D that was not there before. When we get to that next multi-year, we hope that's a better Black Hawk aircraft. So the one we have is great, but we hope that that R&D and then cutting across the whole FIDUP will allow us to have a better aircraft. So, sir, that'll help preserve some. And so the third thing I would mention is the shift of resources. Most of the resources that were moved around stayed within the aviation portfolio. So, for example, engineers working on manned aircraft, we hope over time can also come to work on unmanned aircraft. So we still need engineering talent, aerospace and mechanical engineers and all those skill sets. I think what you see 25, you'll see a sustained commitment to aviation in the Army budget-wise. But it'll be different work, sir, potentially.
So, General McCurry, you sort of described the, what the Army learned from the R&D work that was done for FARA. And you listed again some of the capabilities and experience that that the Army benefited from. So, will some of that be applied to this Black Hawk modernization effort that Mr. Bush described?
Thanks, Congressman. Thanks for the chance to comment, and I think I'll pass it to General Phillips after I make a couple opening comments because he's got the tech piece of that.
Okay.
But I think that definitely from the aviation proponency standpoint, the #1 priority for a Black Hawk going forward would be open system architecture. The ability for us to turn and be more nimble as we react to changes on the battlefield and put a new piece of kit on a Black Hawk, that open architecture helps us do that very well. We've benefited from that, already as we look forward to the FLORA program, and I think that General Phillips could comment on the specifics.
Sure. General?
Sir, I'd be happy to, and I appreciate the opportunity to answer your question and appreciate the question. I think a lot of the technologies we've been working on the FARA program are directly transferable to the Black Hawk. And when we look at the workforce that we have there on that facility, I'm very familiar with them. I talk to the leadership there, the team very often about their workforce, the health of their workforce, and the health of the industrial base. So I'll start by saying that we're going to continue to execute the multi-year 10 contract that we have for 2 additional years. In that time frame, we'll be laying the foundation for the multi-year 11 contract. And as we lay that foundation, we'll have a healthy amount of research and development in that when it comes to open systems that we've fully proven out on the FARA open systems verification demonstrations. We've had a launch effect program that we've been integrating there as well. And absolutely, from a sustainment perspective, we can look at all those items that we're facing obsolescence potentially on the Black Hawk in the future and then double down on those as well.
Thank you again. Running out of time here, but hopefully we'll get a chance to get sort of some description of what this modernization is going to mean, and also for survivability, since we've heard a lot about how that's certainly a rising, emerging challenge and risk for people flying it. So again, thank you though for at least walking us through what's going to happen to that really, as I said, precious workforce, and that I yield back.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Courtney. We'll now go to Dr. McCormick.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for expertly pronouncing rotary wing today.
Thank you. Thank you. I practiced all day today.
I can tell it's amazing improvement, and it's good to be amongst fellow people who are into the vertical lift community. As a fellow helicopter pilot, I can almost identify the people who fly helicopters by how good-looking and intelligent you are, and I appreciate that. Now, notice I did not bring my crayons today. We have no Marines here to entice. So I left those back in my office, but if you want to stop by, we can start your transition at your leisure. With that said, Assistant Secretary Bush, I appreciate you and the other witnesses, and I actually think you did the right thing by divesting from the FARA program. I think as a guy who would least likely want to be in the scout industry in an urban warfare environment, I think it would be outrageous nowadays with the technologies we have to gather the same information with something so much smaller, cheaper, and with less risk to personnel. We saw what happened with Black Hawk Down and trying to retrieve pilots that have been shot down. It's a horrible situation that puts us at a tactical disadvantage. So I'm really excited about that. But what I was hoping you could do is speak to the Army's plan for developing a vertical lift program, perhaps autonomously, or optionally, optically manned to provide those ISR and intelligence, reconnaissance, surveillance, or the C2 command and control or other capabilities to joint force operations in a contested urban environment. If you could just talk to what the, obviously nothing classified, but just kind of what the plan is to, put bang where the buck is.
Yes, sir. So if I could start and then turn to General Rainey for some more detail. I think, and the chairman actually articulated well, I think last year if you'd asked us what our unmanned system plans were, they were a bit amorphous and unclear, to be honest. I think when we get to come over and give you the whole story of what 25, 29, I think we have a much better, clearer plan of how to invest and where to invest. And that's great work that General McCurry and General Rainey and their teams have done on the requirement. Now paired with, we're getting to the point where we really know acquisition-wise how we're going to get at each one of those things. And if I gave you one big number, it would be across the FIDP, you're going to see at least $2.5 billion investing in unmanned aircraft. So for the Army, across a range of systems. So I think, sir, that we have better clarity now on what we need. Now it's getting the money lined up and making it, working with Congress to do it, faster, as General Rainey was talking about. But if I could turn to him for some more specifics.
Thank you, Congressman. I am an infantryman, not an aviator. So, but in all seriousness, yeah, the investment of UAS at scale, at echelon, the human-machine integrated formation experiment that I mentioned, we're specifically doing that in the incredible urban training facility we have out at the National Training Center, because that is the absolutely most lethal place we expect to fight. And while we'll do everything to avoid it, all the trends in the world show that being able to fight in urban areas is a skill that the United States military and ground forces, soft Marines and Army are going to have to maintain excellence at. So all that lethality, all the danger associated with crossing an open area, the first thing into a building, there's no reason for that to be one of our precious men and women in uniform, and we're leveraging technology. I think you'd be excited. I'd love to come back over in a couple of weeks and show you the results of that, because we're gonna.
I'd love that.
We'd love to have you, but in the guiding principle, no blood for first contact. In any case, there is no excuse to find minefields, find the enemy, find IEDs with humans, and that's what's driving our passion to modernize in this space. One last point, if I may. Affordable, attritable, configurable. We got to get UASs that we can, if you lose them, you lose them. We got to be able to configure payloads, some of the stuff that Mac was talking about that we've learned. So network extension, EW, lethal payloads.
Gotcha.
And get them to a price point where we can dominate them with mass.
And that's, I think, the key right there. We're saving money and saving lives simultaneously. You can't ask for a better solution. I'm going to be quick because we're almost out of time, but I was hoping you could speak to the drivetrain upgrades of the Apache and what that means as far as versus and neither one of you can answer this, but versus the alternatives that we chose not to do as far as bang for the buck, once again.
So I can start out and answer that question. For the Apache, we've looked at the tail rotor drive system specifically, and on the tail rotor drive system, the tail rotor blades to start with. That's an immediate action step we're going to start taking this year, and then the tail rotor drive system go with that. As we look forward to the ITEP integration, we know we're going to need more tail rotor authority. That's step one. The main rotor blades, we've replaced most of those with composite main rotor blades. We still have a few that remain that are metal main rotor blades, but those are the drivetrain specific items we're going to work on for the Apache, sir.
Okay, great. I know I'm out of time, so thank you for your time, Mr. Chair.
Dr. McCormick, thank you. We will now go to Dr. Jackson.
Thank you, Chairman Whitman, and I appreciate you letting me participate in the hearing today. Mr. Bush, thank you for being here today. I appreciate seeing you again, and you're always generous with your time. General Rainey, General McCurry, General Phillips, thank you guys for being here as well. As you know, I used to be on TALB last term, but I'm no longer on Tactical Air and Land. But I came here because I think most of you know I have an interest in the vertical lift, having Bell helicopter in my district and whatnot. But I have one question here for you to start with. I understand that what you'd mentioned, that when our threats, of our adversaries evolve, that we also have to evolve our capabilities and reevaluate and force design, so on and so forth. So I get that part of it. To be completely transparent, while I'd heard rumors of FAR's cancellation for a long time, the most frustrating thing I think for me was that I'd asked about this back in December, and I was given no indication that this was going to happen. So, but I understand that that it is what it is at this point. While I maintain my concerns with the cancellation of the FAR, ultimately that decision has been made, and we need to move forward now and work collaboratively on it. And I get that. In the Army's announcement about aviation realignment, it mentions that a key component of the Army's plan is to continue the Future Long-Range Assault Aircraft program as scheduled. This is important because we need this aircraft as soon as possible, in my opinion. The speed and the range capabilities that are provided by the future long-range assault aircraft are going to be a game changer, specifically in the Indo-Pacific. We've talked about that before, the great distances, and that was part of the reason that Bell ended up with the contract. But I still think that, that's something that's, and I understand what you've been talking about with autonomous and unmanned aircraft, but I think that those issues don't take over or don't, alleviate the need for this particular capability. From my perspective as a member of HASC and as a representative of the Tilt Rotor Industrial Base, I just want to ensure that we are all on the same page when it comes to this particular program. So, Mr. Bush and General Rainey, can you pledge to me that the Army will remain committed to the future long-range assault aircraft? And further, to the best of your knowledge, will the Department of Defense overall remain committed to fielding this new critical aircraft?
Sir, so if I could start, and I just want to assure you that, the officers you spoke to in December were telling you the truth as they knew it. The Army always, sometimes to a fault, frankly, tells the truth. That is a core principle of the Army, especially with our relationship with Congress. We try really hard to do that. So there was no effort to not inform members. I just want to assure you of that. But, sir, it was a closely held decision in a small circle, as you can imagine. So I'm sorry it appeared that way, but so we always try to tell the truth when we can.
I believe you on that. You've been very honest and open with this in my experience, so thank you.
Yes, sir. So I just want to make sure that was clear. With regard to the program, I think in 25 you will see still firm, full commitment to FLRAA. I think critically we have a milestone B coming up for that program. So that's a formal entry into the more official part of the acquisition process that requires a complete, hard-looked, hard-baked cost estimate, for example, that's funded. So, there's gates we have to go through now that will further solidify the Army's commitment to this effort. And I can assure you that my understanding, you'll have to ask the Chief and Secretary yourself, but they remain 100% committed to that aircraft.
Yes, sir. I remain 100% committed to the requirement for that aircraft. That is absolutely a capability we need for a couple reasons. You mentioned one, the primary place we need to be concerned about is the Pacific and the ranges, the ability to self-deploy, twice the speed, twice the range. It's absolutely essential for us to confront the challenge presented by China in the Pacific. The second one, I mentioned it earlier, is we are learning a lot from what we're seeing in Ukraine and the horrific attrition-based warfare. Trading humans for, terrain, that's not how we fight as a joint force. We don't do that. We vertically envelop our enemies. We go to places they aren't and create position of advantages. And our light infantry men and women, which is the most important weapon system we have, cannot do that without FLRAA.
Thank you. And real quickly, I want to just ask one more question. When I read through the announcement, I noticed, and we just talked about this, the commitment for a new multi-year contract to procure and upgrade Black Hawk helicopters, but the FLRAA program in part was replacing the Black Hawk helicopters to some extent. So while I understand the need to be able to fight today, I'm worried about creating a program for tomorrow where the future long-range assault aircraft is basically set up for a competition for production quantities with the H-60. Mr. Bush, is there any concern from your perspective in investing in R&D for upgrades to the Black Hawk and entering into another multi-year procurement contract while simultaneously funding and developing the Black Hawk's replacement? Further, do you think the Army is setting itself up for a competition in the future between an upgraded H-60 and the future long-range assault aircraft?
So, sir, my colleagues here at the table could talk to you about that future force mix as far as where the Army is right now. I think it's not a competition. I think the Army's going to have both of those aircraft a long time, and we need both industrial bases, and we need both to be capable of going to war and surviving. So I don't see it as a competition. I see it as giving future leaders of the Army and future members of this committee more options to help the Army continue to adapt to the battlefield of the future, rather than foreclose an option entirely. So, sir, we're working on FY26 right now. That's what the Army's already working on. We're keenly aware of the need to make sure that both things are resourced properly. And then over time, as we hopefully do well in the FLRAA program, that will inform decisions about what might come next. But that follow-on multi-year right now, sir, would be the length of our commitment to Black Hawk production as I understand it right now. But that would go on 5 years. So if we're talking FY31 would be the tail year of that investment, sir, with production to come after.
Thank you, Mr. Bush. And I yield back, Mr. Chairman, and thank you once again for allowing me to be here today.
Absolutely, Dr. Jackson. Thank you. Thanks for joining us. We'll now go to Mr. Jimenez.
Thank you, and this won't take long. I was just thinking when you were talking to my colleague, Dr. McCormick, General Rainey. Have you ever seen the movie Ready Player One?
I have not.
That talks about, it really, part of it is people living in a virtual world and doing combat virtually. So I would hope that we're heading in that direction where our people are not put in harm's way, but our machines are, and it seems like we may be heading in that way. So I'd love to see whatever you got going.
I look forward to showing that, Congressman, and I have unfortunately experienced quite a bit of that, and that drives my passion to make sure that the next time we fight, we're doing everything we can to destroy our enemies and do it in a way that preserves the most precious thing we have as our service members.
Amen to that.
Thank you, Mr. Menace. We will now go to Mr. Norcross.
Thank you, Chairman. Just want to follow up on a couple of the concepts you talked about with my question on what did we gain, what have we learned from Farah before it was canceled. And one of those, which is happening on both, is that open architecture. Across services, they're doing it at different rates, at different events. But the one thing that we have found in some of the other programs is to put an open architecture on an existing system. Now we're getting into contracts, and it takes two to tango. So whether it's the Black Hawk or the Apache moving forward, how are we going to gain that concept of the open architecture onto an existing platform for those parts that are going to be the same they were before?
Yes, sir. So if I could start, I think open architecture is a spectrum. So it's not like a one or the other. And I think, as you point out, that it is a challenge to do it with a legacy platform that was developed as a fully integrated system, all the intellectual property owned by an OEM. And we have great aircraft in that category, but it's a partnership, frankly. The government shouldn't be in a position of forcing that, but hopefully working with industry, and I think they want to go to open systems too. I think that's where industry's moving, and it's even in the commercial realm because of all the advantages of it. So I think that's going to be a conversation, but we do have leverage in terms of the dollars we're bringing, but I think our industry partners will be willing to meet us at least halfway because they see benefit in it as well. The need to upgrade, especially, for example, with mission systems or survivability equipment, is really non-negotiable. I mean, if the threat is evolving that quickly, we have to have systems that we can adapt just as quickly. Sir, I think industry will be open to these conversations, and we've done it in the past on a few things. It is easier when you start from scratch, though. You're right, sir. So it'll be a challenge. And General Phillips, of course, knows more about this than I do if you want a little more.
Please, because we've found that, in fact, from the floor, those who want to play, we know we're going there. Some are just the reluctant child who's lagging behind.
Sir, I appreciate that question. We've worked hard in Army Aviation to really open the aperture from an open system architecture approach over the past 5 years. We inherited a lot of great things that came out of the science and technology community. A lot of great work was done there that we learned from. We learned from the other services on how they were implementing it. And then we took a hard look on how we could implement it on clean sheet designs, as you said, and then how we could implement it on aircraft that have been in our fleet for a while and will be in our fleet for a while. I'd like to think we're early adopters in that arena. And I think on those add-on capabilities, we've looked at ways just very incrementally as a system goes obsolete in an aircraft, we'll take that system, upgrade it to an open standard, and then move to the next system and to the next system until we have a full open system and maybe an enduring fleet aircraft. This opportunity with the Black Hawk multi-year that would come up next and with the Chinook production would give us an opportunity to look at those mission systems as well for those same open standards and get those in those contracts, sure.
Thank you. Just want to shift back to the ITEP. We're into roughly $1.5 billion. Obviously, that was part of the future of Farah, which we're not going to, and the idea going into the Black Hawk and the Apache. Do you tend to accelerate the integration into those two systems now that we're holding up on Farah?
Sir, if I could start and let the generals fill in. I think, and you asked the question in your opening, we're not pausing the ITEP effort. You will see in 25 sustained R&D across the FIDA. What we did do was make a decision on pulling down the procurement dollars. We're going to revisit that in POM 26 to understand, based on how things are going with integration on Apache and Blackhawk, when those procurement dollars need to come back into the program. So the Army remains committed to that program and getting that capability for the fleet. It's just a question of how and when is the right time to actually go to procurement versus research and development.
So I can add on that with the ITEP program, we've got engines in test stands today. We've got engines in the aircraft today that we're going to run in the FAR aircraft. And we will learn from that. And then again, back to what's transferable to the Blackhawk, a lot of that information that we'll learn on that ITEP integration is directly transferable to the Blackhawk. And then as we look into that, just like Mr. Bush said, on the production, what is that checklist of readiness for production? We can make some smart decisions there as we go forward. There's a lot of great technology in that engine. It's a 3,000 shaft horsepower engine versus a 2,000 shaft horsepower engine. And really, it's even more fuel efficient over life cycle. So we can look at that carefully and look at that checklist and make good, appropriate decisions with the Army.
So the idea of keeping that R&D side of it with the engineers and everything else that goes with this, how do we keep that going without them losing it if there's the pause or not the ramp up, let's put it that way?
Yes, sir. So, I mean, we're going to have to, if you could, I wouldn't say we have that plan completely figured out yet. You know, as we go over that this year, as we're doing POM 26, we're happy to have conversations with members about whether we're on track or not without being able to be completely transparent, but we want your input. So I think it's just when can we afford to do that at scale and when's the right time? We still have a great engine now that GE also makes. I visited the factory up in Massachusetts, Great American, it's doing great work. How do we not lose that goodness? Because we still need those aircraft engines for ongoing production while shifting to production of the new one, but in a way that controls cost, and we are confident in the production line being worth investing in. So we think we'll get there. It's just a question of when, sir, exactly.
Thank you. Appreciate it. And I yield back.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Norcross. General Rainey, I do want to explore a little bit more about unmanned. I know the Army in their future aviation plan looks to divest in the RQ-7 Shadow. The question I have is that it seems like to me that capability hasn't become antiquated overnight. In fact, we see the Iranian Shahed drone wreaking havoc in a lot of areas around the world, very similar to the RQ-7 Shadow. So the issue is it appears that our UAS capabilities, if we get rid of the RQ-7, are going to have a dip. So the question is what are we doing to close that gap in those capabilities, and what UAS solutions do we have out there? I think that those things are key, and the question is, have we fallen behind our near-peer competitors in the things that they are bringing to the forefront? We see a lot of things that are emerging in Russia's response to Ukraine. We also see things happening in the Middle East that are concerning. What's the plan for the Army to bridge the UAS gap? So if you're going to retire RQ-7 and there's nothing there as an immediate replacement, and you were talking about a couple of years out in the future for both the unmanned systems and counter-unmanned systems, what's our path forward there to close that gap?
Yes, Chairman, thanks. So the Shadow is obsolete to now. I mean, you can talk about whether it was earlier, and we should have seen that earlier, which I wouldn't contest. But the next time we go to war, Shadows and Ravens are not part of that solution. So that's one part of it. We have written new directed requirements that we're pursuing aggressively, and we'll work closely with Congress because we'll need some help for loitering munitions, for ground-based missiles, and for a systems approach to new UAS. We think the company level is a good place. There's no shortage of companies that have great capabilities. We will acquire them as fast as we can and as fast as we can move the money, this year, next year. I believe if we were ever to have to put soldiers in harm's way, we would get the support and could rapidly close that gap. I am alarmed by some of our enemies in a lot of ways. Going back to my point about affordability, attritability, the mass with which people are producing UASs is something that we're going to have to address in terms of the amount. But as far as technology and capabilities, the Gray Eagle and extending the range of the Gray Eagle, which Matt could talk about, but we're exploring, probably not in this setting because it would be useful to our enemies, but we're employing ways to employ some of the kit that we do have. We're looking at small balloons. We're looking at different ways to sense deeper. So I don't want to say that we have it figured out, but we have the teammates in place. The technology exists in America. We've written requirements. We've got great acquisition teammates. We just need to move out.
Secretary Bush, you talked a little bit earlier about the interest of private industry to develop and invest in these technologies, and you alluded to the fact that they're sort of looking into the windshield and seeing what the future is. How do you see the Army being able to, as General Rainey put, quickly develop and field these systems using off-the-shelf technology? Are we at a point where you all could quickly operationalize that? Seems like to me you've at least have explored the concepts of operation for these unmanned systems. How confident are you that you could press the gas pedal and get to get to motion pretty quickly?
Sir, so from an authority standpoint, the work this committee primarily led in terms of giving us more flexible acquisition authorities, you've done that. So the tools from an authority standpoint are there. Sir, to be honest, right now, the main inhibitor, and I don't say this lightly, is this long CR. That's one. That's hurting us both on UAS and counter UAS because it limits our ability to reprogram and do new things. You know that, sir. So that's one. We're hoping we get through that and we can move out on some of the efforts General Rainey talked about in consultation with the Congress through reprogrammings. So the second thing is I do believe, yes, we can go fast in this area, and we've done it in counter UAS as well. So again, this committee wrote special authorities for kind of emergency combat situation that we've used twice since October 7th for counter UAS systems for CENTCOM. Sir, so in that case, it was extra reprogramming when we found the money. But yes, sir, if we can work with Congress to align the funding or get it to us in a way that's a little more flexible, it would enable us to go fast. You've given us the tools. It's really lining up the money. I think the work the team has done on the requirement for what to procure quickly, that thought has matured greatly over the last few years, thanks to my colleagues on my left. I think we're in a better place to give the Congress confidence that we wouldn't just be spending money to do it. Yeah. It's more concrete, and we'll be able to give you a look across the fight-up, sir, as soon as we can. I think a classified setting would help paint the whole picture, and you can just tell us where you think we got it right and wrong.
Okay. Very good. That's very helpful. I couldn't agree with you more as far as the harmfulness of CRs. That's not the way this body should function. I would argue it takes away from the enterprise. So I'm cautiously optimistic with today's vote that it'll open the window for a final determination on March the 22nd, and hopefully at that point you all can press the gas pedal and go. But yes, we do want to make sure that we are staying informed on your progress, especially in this dynamic environment that we are in. I think being able to operate at the speed of relevance is more important today than it's probably been in recent memory. So whatever we need to do to make sure we enable you, whether it's reprogramming or whether it's further direction or further authorization, our window is open now for next year's NDAA. So let us know. We are standing by, making sure that we're there to help or get out of the way, whichever is best. So anyway, we'll do that. Ms. Norcross, anything else? Good. I think all the other members are gone. So with that, gentlemen, thank you so much. Thanks for taking your time today and coming in and giving us your perspective on these incredibly important Army aviation program elements. We are excited about the future. We appreciate the tough decisions that you all make and shine a little bit of light on how the decisions were made today. We appreciate that aspect. And with that, subcommittee is adjourned.